this is the story of the Manic Street Preachers, a tale with more blood, sweat and tears than a Shakespearean tragedy. It's the story of four angry young men from the Welsh valleys who grew up determined to take on the world. Today, 8 years after their first proto-punk single, Suicide Alley, and via numerous outrageous headlines, they're in place to do just that. September the 14th sees the release of the band's fifth album, This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours, and should, to paraphrase Noel Gallagher, see them either conquer the planet or resign themselves forever to two men and a dog down the Bullen Gate. It's hard to believe that it was 8 years ago that the Manics burst onto the rock scene, looking like excitable schoolboys experimenting with their first dab of mascara. Already in their early 20s, though they naturally lied about their age, they grabbed media interest with their spectacular image. Guitarist Richie Edwards and bassist Nicky Wire wore full makeup and glam rock feather boas, and also their highly literate slogan spouting. They hated all dance and indie music and lamented the lack of heroin-tainted rock and roll. They quoted Sylvia Plath and Public Enemy. They were the opposite of everything that was popular in 90s Britain, and to make matters worse, they were Welsh. Manic's biographer Simon Price.
In the context of 1991, the Manics were complete freaks. Everybody else was wearing baggy clothing and I guess making baggy sounding music and dance influenced stuff and I guess vaguely modern music. And here's this band making complete unashamedly retro punk rock, and they were dressed in tight white jeans and their mother's blouses with situational slogans sprayed all over them. Most bands then and now are very much into humility, of saying we're just like everyone else, we make records for ourselves, if anyone else likes it, it's a bonus. The Manics were completely the opposite. They, as part of the whole agenda, they had to be populist, they had to be successful, they had to be extremely successful. The Manics were certainly freaks in their own hometown, but on the other hand, I do think coming from Wales, or coming from a place like South Wales, is crucial to understanding them. I think the most important thing that shaped them was probably boredom.
Gary Crowley backstage at Band Explosion with the Manic Street Preachers. You guys come from what, Blackwood?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, what have you sort of like made of all of that?
Everybody understands boredom when it comes from a place as depressing. We didn't have any other friends, we just know each other. Just stay down Jim's bedroom every day for years and years and years. So we got some guitars. We don't demand originality because we think it's worthless. You know, we want to say something and we want to look good and we want to make rock music that says something.
Music journalist Iestyn George.
Blackwood's kind of a sort of little lost place outside Cardiff, really. It's not like a kind of satellite of Cardiff in any way. It's just literally in a no man's land, even in South Wales terms. It's a really small place, covered in sort of mist, and it always seems really raining and miserable all the time. There just doesn't seem to be much going on there at all, and it's no great surprise that the Manics turn to kind of entertaining themselves, really, because there isn't much to do there beyond smashing things up, which is pretty much seemingly what everybody else does. There's a real odd kind of background to all those areas. I mean, really a very hard socialist backbone to them. I mean, there's a place called Mardy, which is not a million miles away, it's not very close, but where, you know, there was a communist mayoress, you know. These are the sort of places where you'd feel like the world ends, really. You know, wild horses roaming the streets and stuff like this. It is quite a wild area.
The Manics quickly modelled themselves into the perfect antidote to the town they'd grown up together in. They were colourful, exotic, dramatic, and would soon become, they declared, adored by millions. The manifesto had been hatched by Richie and Nicky when they were at Swansea University together, studying politics and history. Nicky's old friend James Dean Bradfield was already an accomplished guitar player and an ex-choir member. James' cousin Sean was a talented trumpeter and musician. With two decent musicians and two inspired thinkers, the Manic Street Preachers were pretty sure global domination was just around the corner. And if people weren't quite ready for them yet, all the best.
You know, had great success because people have talked about you, and you seem to sort of polarize people. People either love Manic Street Preachers or hate them. Is that something you really like?
That's what we always wanted. You know, we really hate to say sort of beef, apathetic music.
You know, we get just as much excitement over being hated as we do love.
A lot of the early gigs, they were actually supporting the people like Flowered Up, I think, or the Levellers, completely inappropriate bands for them to support. And a lot of the time, people just standing there open mouthed, just completely bewildered, like, you know, what the hell is going on? And the Manics loved that, they thrived on that, and part of the whole essence was to be completely confrontational. I mean, that's what You Love Us was all about, because at that time, nobody loved them, everyone hated them, except for the press who took a perverse delight in the whole phenomenon. But the audience certainly thought, you know, who the hell do they think they are? And there they are, charging out stage, pointing at the audience, shouting, no, you love us.
I just like looking back and looking like we look like dickheads or we look stupid or we said something silly, you know. just proves that we genuinely were young. We were only 20, you know, and that's when you feel strong and you feel, you know, idealistic.
It's really easy to have, like, sum up what those times meant. You look at those things, and all the things we said were, yes, they were naive. Yes, they were kind of like very subjective, really rational. And like, you know, like I've said before, all those things are usually born out of being idealistic. I think to actually make all those mistakes, you've got to have been idealistic in the first place. And that's how we made so many mistakes. We had like Tourette syndrome, wherever we had in our head, we just said it. So therefore, kind of, we had to live up to so many ridiculous things that we said ourselves, just because we did feel it.
Despite signing to ultra-hip label Heavenly, joining forces with highly respected band manager Philip Hall, and their insistence that you love us. In 1991, the band were playing to tiny audiences, many of whom were appalled by their androgynous look, which is obvious and unashamed lack of musicianship, and the odd Sex Pistols-inspired mini riot at the gigs. They told the press their first album would be a double and would sell 16 million, after which they were split up. There were a few believers though. GQ editor James Brown.
I went on tour with them for the cover for the NME. We did them really quick because they were a really exciting band and they were quite different to everything else. And because they were making mighty claims and they were very arrogant, and because the NME had given them a big push, people very quickly drew up whether they liked them or didn't like them. But it was blatantly obvious to me that they had the passion and the ambition and the self-belief that they would go far. I hadn't seen them for a while, and then I saw Motorcycle Emptiness on MTV, and I thought, wow, that was it. I think it was filmed in a fairground in Japan or somewhere, and it just looked, yeah, they're starting to realise their dream.
Radio 1's Steve Lamacq was at the time a non-believer, and told the band so when he interviewed them in May 1991. In order to prove his rock and roll credentials, Ritchie took out a razor and scratched the words "for real" into his arm. While the act alarmed some observers, to the band it was pure Ritchie and perfectly rock and roll. Simon Price.
I think with Ritchie, if you were around him, he did have this aura of indestructibility. Right from the beginning, for instance, when he cut his arm up in front of Steve Lamacq, the outside world was shocked, but the band were very much, oh, that's just Ritchie, that's what he does.
February 92 saw the release of the double debut album Generation Terrorists. The punk edge the band has shown at gigs had been smoothed off. Some criticised the album's soft metal underbelly, but it had always been part of the plan to make totally commercial rock.
I think their choice of power chords and heavy rock music was kind of a pragmatic move. I'm not saying they didn't love that music, they did completely grow up on heavy metal, but having said that, they actually had sit-down band meetings about this. Shall we make difficult-sounding indie music like The Fall, or shall we go for absolute populism? And they looked around them. They saw that all the kids they went to school with were into Bon Jovi, and that's what they wanted to sound like, so they knew that would sell albums. I think they've always thought they have something worth saying, so obviously you want to get that across to the largest possible audience.
Generation Terrorists did not sell 16 million. Interviewed at the time, however, James and Ritchie sounded undeterred.
You did say you were going to be bigger than Guns N' Roses. How is that strategy shaping up?
We always like a sense of proportion, as certain journalists said, so we're lagging behind at the moment, but we might get there in 2 years' time.
When you go to America, this album will have obviously gone screaming up the charts here. Are you looking forward to that sort of the handshaking and the sincerity you're about to witness when you get there?
You know, it's always been one of our ambitions to be surrounded by sycophants, because we've always been treated like scum all our lives, so we're looking forward to it.
September, though, brought the Manics their biggest hit, a cover of the theme from MASH, Suicide is Painless. It got to number 7 in the charts. December 92 also brought the band their biggest headlines, when Nicky Wire declared from the stage at the Kilburn National that he hoped Michael Stipe would go the same way as Freddie Mercury. Press and music fans buoyed themselves up for another year of Manic theatre. But 1993 saw the band go oddly quiet. The album Gold Against the Soul was not accompanied with the sound and fury of its predecessor, and press interest was waning. Simon Price.
Gold Against the Soul is the band's least favourite album now. Apparently they can't bear to listen to it. But I think they're being unfair to it, and history's being unfair to it. It was, again, a definite, calculated move to try and appeal to America. Everybody says it's sort of stadium pop or stadium rock, and some of the tracks certainly are, like Roses in the Hospital. But on the other hand, a lot of them are quite grainy and grungy. I don't think they completely went off the rails there, but I do think that year, 1993 in general, was a year where they, if not exactly softened up, they certainly took their foot off the accelerator. They weren't dressing up the same way. They weren't spraying slogans over themselves. They weren't saying these outrageous things in the press. 1993 was the year the Manics were on autopilot, and perhaps that's reflected a little bit in the music.
Press interviews also revealed a decline in the band's spirits, more dramatically in Richie's health, both mental and physical. He spoke of drinking a bottle of vodka whenever he felt sad, and of keeping a strict, meagre diet to avoid a beer gut. He also spoke admiringly of the self-control of anorexics and people who abuse their bodies with razors. The situation was steadily worsening when at the end of the year, the band were dealt another cruel blow. They lost their beloved manager, Philip Hall, to cancer, which deeply affected them. They began 1994 seriously disillusioned. 1994 was to be a traumatic year for the band. Early in the year, they went to Thailand, where it was reported that Richie's drinking was out of control. There, he slashed his chest on stage with some knives given to him by a fan. When he came home, he was an alcoholic and sliding into anorexia. His inner torment was reflected in the songs he was writing for the band's third album, The Holy Bible, in songs like 4 Stone 7 Pounds about anorexia and the disturbing archives of pain. Nicky, however, remembers the album sessions fondly.
When we recorded it, I look back with great fondness. It was, a lovely time. It was in a tiny little studio in Cardiff, and Richie was buying a flat. It was just brilliant. But when I finished it, I thought, we're going to have to go and play this live for the next 6 months. And when you actually read some of the lyrics Richie in particular had written, then it was slightly disturbing, to say the least. Play songs like Die in the Summertime or Intense Minute of Evil live, and it just seeps through a little bit.
James also remembers the album with pride.
In a strange way, it's probably one of the things I'm most proud of, because when we were doing that album, I still thought, Faster was going to be a #1 single. I still thought we were going to be gigantic. And like it showed that we were in such a natural state. I was really excited to make their album, and I felt, yes, we're going to beat the out of everybody. And of course, it was our lowest selling album, but I still love it.
Was there a moment of complete disillusionment when you suddenly thought, God, they're not going to be #1 singles, people aren't buying it?
Yeah, no, definitely. It was the first single, Faster.
Were you angry about it? And
yeah, a tiny
annoyed?
bit. I think we were in such a trance on that album. I thought it would be like a wave of realization would just come over people's minds and go, oh my God, the unspeakable truth is this, we must face it. So pretentious. But that's kind of the way I felt at the time.
August saw the release of the album and the hospitalization of Richie. A press release stated that he had decided to seek psychiatric help for what was basically an illness. James Dean Bradfield spoke to Steve Lamack at the time.
Richie had to go into hospital. Then everything had to come to a halt. It just, got to a point where we realised that kind of like he couldn't control his own little obsessions anymore, basically. I mean, he's always been just a self-abusive person in every way. And kind of whether you look upon that as perpetuating a self-myth or trying to be iconoclastic is besides the point. When you get past a certain point, then you realise somebody's just ill and there's no basic intelligence at work.
But the tour, Richie will be back for that?
Hopefully be back for the British. So, I don't want to get too dramatic and say, hey, just light a candle for the boy tonight. Like that. I answered because you asked. For the last week, he's been much better. Well, I mean, kind of like almost unrecognisable from when he actually went into the hospital. So he's much better now.
The band performed summer festivals as a 3-piece, before Richie rejoined them for a winter tour supporting Suede. The tour was to be one of the most difficult periods of the band's career.
We were doing a tour of Suede in Europe around the Holy Bible, and it's just our situation. Richie'd come out of hospital and it was just horrendous. Richie was chain smoking 60 to replace the drink. James was drinking non-stop, and I tried to explain to James one night that I want to go home and leave, and he was really understanding. And he went out and got smashed that night and couldn't remember it in the morning. So it was like 4 weeks of hell.
3 months later, on February the 1st, 1995, Richie Edwards went missing after checking out of his London hotel on the eve of the band's American tour. A week later, his car was found abandoned on the Severn Bridge, a notorious suicide spot. To this day, nobody knows if he is alive or dead. Nicky gave an interview to Radio 1 3 months later.
Well, as far as I know, Richie disappeared from the Embassy Hotel. He went back to his flat in Cardiff. He left his passport, he left his Prozac, and he drove off in his car. From that day on, we know absolutely nothing.
Do you feel that you can put all that behind you now?
No, I don't want to put it behind me because it's a massive part of my life. I've known Richie for so long. I really admired him. Thought he was a genius, and I'll never ever forget him.
Nobody Loves You from the new album, the first song Nicky has written directly for Richie. With Richie gone, the band were about to enter a new phase. It would see them get closer to their original dreams than any previous record. With guitarist and co-songwriter Richie Edwards gone from the band, 1996 saw a new Manic Street Preachers emerge. The first single released by the three-piece, A Design for Life, sounded a million miles away from the dark indulgences of the last album, The Holy Bible. Strongly anthemic and melodic, the single went to number 2 in April, giving the Manics their biggest hit yet.
First of all, when I heard A Design for Life, it was one of those singles which, even if you hate this band, it's something you have to grudgingly admit is a classic single. The album itself, I guess there were some people who thought the Manics had gone soft, gone ultra soft, even more so than on Gold Against the Soul. I just thought it was a fantastic record. It basically contained all the elements that had already been there in the Manics. Uplifting melody tinged with melancholia. I thought they'd almost perfected that on the album. The Holy Bible is the sound of a band or a mind falling apart. Everything goes very much the sound of a band finding a reason to live and a reason to carry on.
The album Everything Must Go was released the next month to wide acclaim. Finally, the band had both the media respect they'd always scorned and the popular success they'd always craved.
I'd much rather sell loads of records and be respected, because I think the only way you truly get your message across to people is by letting them hear the songs. The fact is, with Design for Life, some people say, well, no one gets it, but there's a million people with our record in their house, and the first line is "Libraries give us power," so it must seep in a little bit.
The plaudits kept on coming, with the album sweeping readers' polls and the band being awarded an Ivor Novello. James admits to pride in the award, as well as an element of shame over his capitulation to the pleasures of industry recognition.
It's really strange that the things that we find really gratifying are so traditional, like the Ivor Novello thing. That's when I felt like myself, and Ricky and Sean, we just felt like such a solid band. We've defined ourselves as three people at last. I feel slightly ashamed for that to actually mean so much to me, because I always like to think I'm quite immune to that kind of thing, but it did feel very gratifying. Every kind of token or trinket of success that we got from Everything Must Go just felt as if, deep down it still felt as if we should be the antithesis to all that. But, you've got to admit inside yourself that it's really hard to spoon those kind of plaudits. We sort of fluttering our eyelashes and we start going, oh, thank you, and we kind of failed on that level.
And the winner is Manic Street Preachers!
The winners of the best group, all the way from Wales, are Manic Street Preachers!
It came as no surprise in February '97 when the granddaddy of the UK music industry, the Brits, presented the Manics with awards for Best Album and Best Group. They did show up to collect the awards, but Nicky's love of perversity and subversion were exposed by his I Love Hoovering t-shirt and his final acceptance speech.
This is also for every comprehensive school in Britain, which the government is trying to eradicate. They produce the best bands, the best art, and the best everything, the best boxes too.
When I spoke to him after the ceremony, Nicky made it clear that he no longer had any interest in traditional notions of rock and roll living, hence the t-shirt. What were your celebrations like last night then?
Very muted.
Were they?
Well, quite exaggerated for me, like I said, I was up till 12:30, my latest night in 5 years probably.
When something like this happens, like when you're winning Brits, is Richie very much on your mind?
No, definitely. This award is as much for him as it is for us, he co-wrote 5 of the lyrics with me. Even if he never writes a song with us ever again, there's still a part of him on every record we'll ever do.
Have you got a timetable over the next year, kind of like expectations when you've got the written stuff by?
We don't want to arse around, so to speak. We want to get a record up as soon as we can, but James is really, badgering me for lyrics all the time.
Is he?
I just, I'm a bit slower these days, and I got lots more to do because Richie's not around.
Unsurprisingly, there were fans who saw the band's refusal to break up after Richie's disappearance, alongside their industry recognition as a betrayal of the band's history. This argument and the so-called cult of Richie is something the band have no time for.
I've got to admit, sometimes if I'm just on my own in my bedroom or something, sometimes I think if somebody said that in my face, I'd have to walk away because I'd just punch them. These fans were just
their version of the truth is just so warped and so misinformed sometimes. How can you say that the Clash went in a straight line? You know, they went from White Riot to Lost in the Supermarket to this video Clash. And if they'd done White Riot all their lives, they would have just ended up being a crappy band like Rancid.
I think it's changed a bit. I think Richie was a spokesman for perhaps more dysfunctional kind of people. Perhaps I'm not that extreme, I don't know. But I think people got the idea fairly soon on that I wouldn't turn up to a gig being anorexic or cutting my arm or anything, you know, being blunt about it.
If You Tolerate This, Your Children Will Be Next was the first the world heard of Nicky's next work, apart from a live taster of Ready for Drowning at Reading last year. Last week it became the band's first #1 single. Did you feel any amount of pressure then from the success of the last album? Even starting this one,
Only when it was finished. Whenever we were in the studio, it was just summer camp, as students calls it, you know, we get on well. It's only when we finished it, when we realised I missed that more than anything, just sitting down. And when we were in Swansea University together, when we started writing, we did Motorcycle Emptiness and stuff. And I just had a title and Richie had a chorus. I mean, I don't think it might not have happened in many bands. I don't know of any actually two lyric writers sat down together. You know, it was a real nice thing to do.
Was this kind of the loneliest album for you to do? The last album?
I don't know, really. I like feeling lonely, so it's not a chore or anything, because I like isolating myself.
Do you feel like he's with you sometimes, like when you're writing lyrics?
Yeah, I just think so. You know, certain songs, God, I know he would like, and certain songs I know he'd think were too soppy. I know what he means, and I know he would interject something much more brutal and dark. But I know if I tried, it'd just seem a bit naff sometimes.
James Dean Bradfield.
I don't see Nick getting older in terms of the way he writes his lyrics. It's still fiercely confrontational against the worldview around him. He still has kind of a dilemma where he doesn't want to write about something, but he always forces himself to write about it. I don't see that as a very old thing. I still see that as something that stems from, like, you know, feeling young and indestructible. Nick might say that kind of he hoovers more now and he cooks more and he takes a dog for a walk, but beneath that all, I still think it's a very young, somebody who thinks he's very young and indestructible and he can write about anything and believe in it and not care what anybody thinks about him. I think that's a very young thing.
Certainly songs like Black Dog on My Shoulder show that Nicky remains as prey to depression as he ever was as an adolescent.
Black Dog on My Shoulder is Winston Churchill's phrase for depression, you know, even during the war years. He refused to kind of see psychiatrists or anything like that. He would just say black dogs on his shoulder again. And he actually suffered from mental depression. And I always kind of refused to take anything for it. I was always scared of getting hooked or something like that. Around when Richie went missing, a lot of doctors kind of advised me to take stuff and all that. I just played in utero all the time to kind of make me feel better.
Is Kurt Cobain someone that you respected, or...?
Yeah, I mean, I completely respect Kurt. I think one of the key things he ever said in his lyrics was, you know, I miss the comfort of being sad. He might have applied to Richie a little bit, the fact that if you become famous and people assume you can have whatever you want and you've reached all your ideals and all the rest of it, but kind of denies you the right to say, I feel terrible. Because if you do, people say, well, why? You're travelling the world, you know, you're drinking, you can do whatever you want, but nothing really changes, you know. I think I've retained the comfort of being sad. It does give me comfort sometimes, melancholia, whether it's just the rain or just me at home. It just makes me feel nice.
Manic's biographer, Simon Price.
I do believe Nicky when he talks about just wanting to lock himself away and do the hoovering and watch women's golf or whatever, because to some extent he always was like that. I mean, I think it was 91 or 92, my memory fails me, when he was diagnosed as having Gilbert's syndrome, the liver disease. He couldn't drink alcohol anymore. He's never been really cut out for the rock and roll lifestyle. He's always had a dodgy back and dodgy ankles, and even at those very early gigs, he'd be out on stage throwing his mic stand in the crowd and smashing someone's head open. Then as soon as he went off stage, he'd be up to the hotel room and straight to bed. Nicky is basically a sort of sensible house husband who on stage is sometimes a complete psychopath, and that's perhaps his most subversive achievement. Whilst people like Robbie Williams and the Gallagher brothers are giving the rock and roll cliche one last spin, Nicky Y is doing the most subversive thing possible by doing completely the opposite and getting his Dyson out.
Recent press interviews have all depicted Nicky as the hoovering house husband, happy in his obscurity with his family and his dog in the Welsh valleys. James, though, is vaguely concerned about the way he himself has been caricatured, as the media turn the three into easily definable, one-dimensional figures.
lovely to find Nick, as I love hoovering man. I'm the kind of gregarious, want to be gregarious social drinker, and Sean's like Mr. Gadget.
It's very funny because it's so completely natural. It's not at all contrived. It's literally you come across as yourselves, which is quite good.
Well, I gotta admit, I didn't really want to be seen as a wannabe New York film star on an imaginary film set, drooped at the bar going, hey, Mr. Barman, what do you think? I didn't want to be looked at like that. But certain people around me have keep the Met Bar jokes rolling, so it's become known.
It's become known, you see, so you're admitting that it's true.
Yeah, well, but I didn't, sometimes you don't want the truth to be known, do you?
In some ways, it's hard to relate these three characters to the wild-eyed, Johnny Rotten wannabes that were first introduced to us in 1991. But then the Manics have been through more changes in their personal and professional life than most of us will go through in a lifetime. Nicky, in particular, is not reluctant to admit to huge changes in his philosophy. So what ambitions have you got now? What is your motivation and your main intent?
I really don't know anymore.
That must be really difficult.
Yeah, it is. I mean, at the start we had such a clear manifesto that it's not so much that I haven't got him anymore, it's just I know I can't achieve him. Like at the start we probably thought we could bring down the monarchy and could dismember the House of Lords, but now you can't. So I think ambition, with Richie going missing, ambition is hugely dented, really. Staying alive is enough.
You have had a lot more kind of adversity than a lot of bands. Did it mellow you at all?
It just knocked the ambition and the sort of 5-year Stalin-esque plans that we used to have for world domination just don't exist anymore. Because you always think that your life could be completely changed tomorrow. I mean, Richie could turn up tomorrow and your whole life is turned upside down, so there doesn't seem any point in planning.
In a career that's had more ups and downs, shocks and surprises than any other, one thing seems definite. When they come to write the popular history of the 1990s, the Manic Street Preachers will be far more than the footnote they look doomed to become in 1991.
Yeah, the true story. They've gained the kind of fan devotion now that bands very rarely do. I mean, even bands who sell a lot more than the Manics, like Oasis, there aren't really Oasis fans as such. They're Oasis consumers. Whereas the Manics have almost started something now that they can't kill. The genie's out of the bottle now and they can't stop it. I actually think the Manics have done more for youth literacy probably than the entire sort of A-level syllabus in the last 10 years. I get letters all the time from fans saying, my bookshelves are stacked with stuff that they've quoted. That's a fantastic achievement. Most bands, if you listen to most bands these days, they just make you want to go out and buy a Rolling Stones record, but the Manics might make you want to go out and read Primo Levi or something.
Welsh music journalist Iestyn George heralds a different kind of significance for the band.
They were an English language group of people in a culture that was increasingly becoming dominated by Welsh language culture. In Wales, the power base is very much around the Welsh speakers, culturally, economically, across the board. I mean, I know certainly with other English language bands like 60 Foot Dolls, it was just a real issue. They felt they'd really not been heard, whereas Catatonia and Superfurries in various guises had always been in the public eye in Wales because they were Welsh speakers. The great thing about the Manics is that they're the first English language band who just kind of almost reached over and said, okay, we can help each other, we can work together with the Welsh language bands. Whereas there's always been a massive divide in the past. Having taken Godpiece and Superfurries and Catatonia on tour with them, they've made a direct signal really to everybody else of what they're all about. It's difficult to say that the Manics are going to bring the nation together, but it's not like an over-exaggeration to say they played a small part.
And what of the band themselves? What dent would they like to see the new album make?
Being idealistic about it, I suppose I'd like to achieve a bit of historical perspective in young people.
James?
I think we're over the fact that we know that it's hard for anything to be original, and we're not particularly original. But I want people to recognise that within our songs we are very unique.
And so just the ability to carry on writing, putting together as a band. And if it all fails, sort of miserably, then that's it really. So that's all. I just enjoy being in a band.
Good drummer's answer. Solid.